Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated in loving memory to Nishmat Oshrat Bat Yosef and Bulor, Aliyah Shalom, by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Also dedicated for the Refuah Shlema of Chana Bat Tzemefega and Eliyahu Shimon Mazar Fortuné. The week of Breakfast in the Class is sponsored by Genevieve and Frank Lalazar, dedicated for the continued spiritual growth and strength of our Jewish community. The learning for this entire week is dedicated by the Daniel S. Loeb Torah Center, gold donors Jack and Shella Sit in loving memory and L'ilui Nishmatim for Ovadia Ben Esther, Rafael Ben Miriam, Rachel Chaya Bat Salcha, and the week of Cobra was sponsored by David E. Ash. In honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. Let's begin. My friends, there seems to be a element here in the pasuk that is worthy of our attention. The pasuk says as follows. It says, "Ele Pekudei Mishkan." These are the reckonings or the countings of the Mishkan. Okay, what is this Mishkan called? Mishkan Ha'edut, the Mishkan of testimony. Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe, which was counted according or by the word of Moshe. So what does this mean that this Mishkan was called Mishkan HaEdut, the tabernacle of Edut, of testimony? What exactly was this testimony that the Mishkan was offering? So most people assume that the Mishkan Edut means it refers to the Edut, which is the Aron HaEdut, which inside of the Aron we know was the Luchot, and that was the Edut, like it says that God gave us Torotav, Hukotav, right? He gave us all these things, and also it says Edotav, okay? That's how some people translate this pasuk. However, there's two other explanations that are given for this idea. One idea is that the Edut the testimony was that God had forgiven the Jewish people. And since God had forgiven the Jewish people for the Mishkan, the proof was found in the fact that God gave them a Mishkan. So that's the proof, the Edut, the witnessing of the fact that God said that He forgave the Jews, that's why there was an Edut here. However, the last and final pshat that I want to share with you today is the idea that the Edut of the testimony that was being provided by the Mishkan was a testimony, says the Or HaHaim. Od yirtzeh al zeh haderech el pekudei Mishkan. What does it mean? Umi yatzdik shechenu velo yoter lazeh amar Mishkan ha'edut. Who is to say that there was any extra money that was being taken or misappropriated or used by anybody else? For that it's called Mishkan ha'edut, the tabernacle of testimony. Pirush ha'mishkan hu ya'id al hadavar. Let the Mishkan bear witness and testimony to the fact that the money was spent correctly. That's what it says, okay? That's how the Or HaChaim explains. And where does he base this idea on? That the Mishkan itself bore edut, that Moshe Rabbeinu had not taken, there wasn't any extra money, there wasn't money that wasn't used. He bases this idea on the Midrash. The Midrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu came to stand up the Mishkan, there was no one that was able to pick it up. They couldn't figure out how to get the Krashim to stand. They were all incredibly heavy. The Mishkan was very, very tall, 10 amot high. So you're talking about something which is, roughly 20 feet tall, built out of solid wood, however many feet wide. It was incredibly, incredibly heavy. So they were unable to pick it up. They come to Moshe, not with strength and not with wisdom. They come to Moshe, and Moshe says, who could ever lift this? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Asok ata biyadecha, you attempt to lift up the Mishkan, and you'll see it will go up by itself. What's the basis of this idea? That when the Torah talks about the Mishkan, it doesn't say that the Mishkan that Moshe stood up the Mishkan. Rather, hu kama Mishkan, that the Mishkan became stood up. So it wasn't Moshe that did it. It happens miraculously, but through Moshe. Okay, so therefore, what is it trying to tell you? Listen to this, the end words of the Orach Chaim. So this miracle that happened with Moshe, that he attempted to put up the walls, and the walls went up by themselves, that was a edut, that was a witnessing, that was a testimony. She'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu oseh nes. God does not do a miracle, le'oseh avel, for someone who's done the wrong thing. Ubefrat, and especially, b'makom atzmo, she'na'aseh bo ha'avel chas v'shalom. And obviously, even more so, that God is not going to do a miracle in the place and for the thing itself where there was an avel done, where there was something incorrect that was done. There were some rabbis who built yeshivot or synagogues that were exceedingly careful with the money that they took to build the yeshiva or the synagogue. And they asked them, what's the big deal? Why don't you just let everyone contribute however much they want, whoever they are? And he said, and listen to this, the power of these words. He said to take a person in a world like we live in today, and he said this back then, with all the influences that it has in it, with all the challenges that it has in it, and that a person should come out Yireh Shamayim, they should come out a person who studies Torah, who knows Torah. That is nothing short of a miracle. With all the elements that persuade him to do the wrong thing, and even not the wrong thing, but just to chase things that are not important, that are not valuable. The power of those influences is so strong. For someone to fight that requires can I ask you for some water? That requires a miracle. And if you want a miracle to happen, what do we just learn? A miracle doesn't happen unless oseh nes le'oseh avel. It can't be that something was done incorrectly, that was done dishonest in the building of this thing. So therefore, in building the Mishkan, thank you so much. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nivaro. Amen. Thank you. In the building of this thing, it would require everything to be done completely honestly, because there are no miracles when things aren't done properly. My friends, I was thinking just the other day that I think maybe we have a retrofit from this pasuk, that if a person is finding that maybe a business is not succeeding, and you know what, it's a tough market, it's not derech hateva or whatever. They want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to show them miracles in whatever they're trying to achieve. Maybe one of the things that a person should be careful for is that the endeavor was done without any oseh avel. Now that's an interesting thing, because it doesn't only end by, is the money I used to make this honest money. Imagine, as an example, I'm building a Bet Knesset or a yeshiva. Every dollar was given by someone who is a righteous person, shomer Shabbat, kind, gives tzedakah. I got only like chashuv, nice, good people to donate money. Imagine. Now what happens? Who builds the Mishkan? Some random guy who's a contractor, steals everybody's money, lies about when he's going to get there. The yeshiva was still built through oseh avel. There were certain rabbis that when they wanted to build something that would have an unbelievable impact on Am Yisrael, on a miraculous level, they were so careful with anything and anyone that was involved in the project. Who's the lawyer who files the patents, the permits? Who's the real estate broker who finds him the property? Is he oseh avel? When something is done with that level of care, of concern, then what happens? Then the thing that you're building is so special, it can produce miracles. My friends, I saw in this something unbelievable. You know, we've talked many times about the fact that the building of a Mishkan is also representative of the building of a Jewish home, of building a family. And this lesson of Mishkan ha'edut, that a miracle happens for someone and for something that's done without any oseh avel, which is 100% done correctly, pure, the money, the people involved, the intention, that the miracle comes in such a case, is something I feel is importable to the conversation about bringing children to this world, raising children in this world, and keeping the home the way that home is supposed to be. I want to share with you a crazy example of this. There is a rabbi who lives in Shchunat Shapira in Tel Aviv. His name is Rabbi Aholiav Hayun. Now, that's not a very common name. I don't know how many Aholiavs you know. Right? It might not be so common. Anyway, so someone once asked him, how'd you get a name like Aholiav? Of course, it's in our parasha, right? The two people who build the Mishkan are called Bitzalel ben Uri ben Chur, right? And Aholiav ben Achisamach, Lematedan. But it's not a common name. So they asked him, what's going on? And listen to the story. His father was married to a woman, and in very old age, she passed away. He was almost 90 years old. Now, I'm reminded in this story about a story that happened only this week with Rav Tzvi Kushelevsky. He's 88 years old, married a woman, I think she was 56 years old, and they had a baby boy, his first child in his life. He's going to be at the bar mitzvah, inshallah, 101. At the chuppah, he'll be 120. So someone said, I can't believe this. What kind of thing is this? I said, you're not understanding. For you think he mail order Russian bride. He went on the internet and he bought a 56-year-old woman. That's not what it is. This man is a tremendous Talmid Chacham, a big tzaddik, has a very famous yeshiva. There are women that are special women, right? They would want to marry a tzaddik. It's not uncommon, you find it, right? It's uncommon that there's such an age gap of 30 years, but, it's not the first time that I've heard of it, right?
Men who aren't married still believe that they...
Sorry?
The men who aren't married at a certain age still believe they can get a 40-year-old young...
Look, I don't think every man should think that he could get that. But when you're, because not every man is Rav Tzvi Kushelevsky, right? This is a man who has thousands and thousands of students. I just want to know, if Rabbi Akiva, suddenly was available on the market, right? I feel like, I would tell my daughter to swipe right. I don't know. I just, let's go. It's Rabbi Akiva, And, you think to yourself, what's going to happen from this? Nothing's going to happen. And look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does this incredible miracle. So listen to this. At 56. I mean, she may have had kids before. I think she had kids before, but he had never had kids. This is his first child, okay? Now, this fellow, Rabbi Aholiav, has a very similar story, but obviously with a different twist. His father was almost 90 years old, and at the time, Ham Yaakov Ades, Alav Shalom, okay? One of the greatest Sephardi Chachamim. He knew that his wife passed away, but he also knew that he was a tremendous person, a tremendous tzaddik. Ironically, why did I use the example of Rabbi Akiva in my little joke? Because it is Rabbi Akiva that teaches that even if you planted trees when you were young, even if you had children when you were young, even if you had students when you were young, even if you married when you were young, you should marry again when you're old. You should try to have children when you're old. You should try to have students when you're old. For Rabbi Akiva taught that age really is only a number, and he himself also actually lived till 120 years old. Okay? So at 40 he starts, you think, I'm 40, I'm already over the hill. He lived 2 more lifetimes of 40 from that point. Some people die at 80. Rabbi Akiva had a full life from the moment he started learning Torah, because his intentions were pure. He was zocheh to miracles. My friends, this fellow, 90 years old almost, Rabbi Yaakov Ades finds him a shidduch. She's 60 years old at the time. Anyway, the rabbi makes a suggestion, but the shidduch gets held up. The woman's not, she's not forthcoming. She doesn't want to go through with it unless her conditions are met. Can I get a drum roll? What do you think this woman's conditions are? Life insurance policy, right? What do you think the woman's conditions are? She's 60, she's marrying a 90-year-old guy.
Definitely a prenup.
Prenup, right? You'd imagine. It's a good one, I like it. I'm going to read you her 3 conditions. On the day of the yahrzeit of Aholiav ben Achisamach, the man who built the Mishkan, number 2, in charge, Ya'alu hitpalel al kivro. They should go to pray by his gravesite. But where is Aholiav buried? He's buried at the top of a mountain in a village called Sogod. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's in southern Lebanon. Number 2, all the men are thinking, yeah, I've met women like this. Condition number 2. They're laughing in the kitchen too. That when we get there, not only are we going to pray at his kever on his yahrzeit, we're going to be miyased the kever. So a lot of these graves, they're in disrepair. They're falling apart. And once it gets rubbed out, no one even knows where they're buried. So she said, my second condition is that we'll redo the tombstone, so make it clear, fix it up, you fix the concrete, whatever. And we'll light a candle for him, for his yahrzeit. What's condition number 3? The child that's born should be called Aholiav, in the name of the tzaddik. These are her 3 conditions. This fellow is very old. He says, I understand the first, second 2, no, the last 2, no problem. Happy to light a candle. I'm happy to name the kid. He says, but I'm 90 years old. I don't know if to travel from Jerusalem to Lebanon to make this journey, right? At my age, it's very far. He's worried about his bones. He's worried about his discomfort. In the end, the rabbi and this woman convince him, and he agrees. A little while after the Chatunah was the yahrzeit of Aholiav. They go, they fulfill all the conditions. The woman is crying on that day by Aholiav's kever, and she prays and she says, Ani asiti et sheli, I did mine. I married a tzaddik. I made a condition to honor Aholiav ben Achisamach. I came on the yahrzeit, we lit a candle, we prayed at your gravesite. Now you go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and plead my case, you do yours. The woman gave birth to a baby girl. What was the condition? That he was going to name the baby after Aholiav. Right? But now what did he have? Baby girl. But after the baby girl, she had another child. She had a son, and the child was called Aholiav. This Aholiav is the rabbi in Shchunat Shapira in Tel Aviv. His name is Rabbi Aholiav Hayun. I read this story, and I was like, wow, but the story's not done. When the child was born, he didn't speak. He was 1 year old, that's pretty normal. 2 years old, already not so common that they shouldn't speak at all. 3 years old. Until 4 years old, the child did not utter a single word. The woman decides, we have to go back. They make the journey again to southern Lebanon, to the kever. They go to pray by Aholiav, and again their prayers are answered, and the child begins to speak. And I was thinking how fascinating it is that in the Torah, we don't find Aholiav talking, to my memory. And again, the child that was named after him also does not speak. But the intention of this woman and the Kiddusha and the Emunah was so strong that a thing that was so impossible to believe that could happen, happened for them. So I want to ask a question. When you think of the words Mishkan Ha'edut, a temple of testimony, what is the Edut? At first sight, at first glance, you look and you think, wow, you know what the miracle here is? You know what the testimony is? The testimony is the miracle that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to stand up the walls. No one could do it, and Moshe put his hands on it, started pushing, and all of a sudden, miraculously, it goes up. But the Orach Chaim is telling us something very different. He's telling us that the testimony is not the miracle. The testimony is that Moshe Rabbeinu did the right thing, that Moshe Rabbeinu's actions and intentions were pure, were clean. There was nothing dishonest about it. And something like that has a strength to be able to build within itself miracles. The edut is on Moshe's behavior. You know, the word nes means a miracle. But nes also means a flag. Like we say, V'sanes lekabetz galuyotenu, in Tekah B'Shofar, raise a flag to gather in our exiles. A lot of people, when they think about miracles that they want, or that they need, or that they witnessed, I think their attention is focused on the wrong area. Their attention is focused on the miracle, on the extraordinary nature of what occurred. But really, the most beautiful, the most wondrous thing, the most miraculous thing about a miracle is that which was done by the human being in this world against all odds and challenges to be able to deserve that miracle. And that's why the Orach Chaim says that the testimony is not on the miracle. The testimony is on the fact that the miracle would not have occurred if not for the fact that Moshe had this. My friends, the Gemara tells us that when a person goes to Shamayim after 120 years, they tell him all the things that he's done or he hasn't done, the mitzvot that she kept or she didn't keep. There's testimony that's being brought in the heavenly court. And the Gemara asks, who are the witnesses that bear this testimony? There's different answers in the Gemara, but I want to share with you one of them. The Gemara says, the walls of your house are the witnesses. That speaks very loudly. How does the walls of my house know what I did when I was out and about? When I was in Vegas? Maybe it stays in Vegas. And the answer is that there's no greater measure of the authenticity of a person than when no one can see him, than when there's no one watching. So the testament of the person's walls of his house, they bear witness literally on you. That is your Mishkan ha'edut. The children you bring into the world, the way that they behave, the house that you run, what goes on in your house, how people feel when they're in your house. That's called Mishkan ha'edut. That bears testimony on who you are and what you stand for. And when you stand for something that is correct, then what happens? Then miracles can come to that house. Children can go through the most difficult times and come out the other side because of the authenticity, because of the integrity, because of the warmth of the love that the house has inside of it. And everyone looks and they're like, wow, what a miracle this child, how he became. I remember when the kid had a reading disorder, he was a nothing, and look at who he is now. I remember when the kid was off the derech, was keeping Shabbat, and look at where he is now. Miracle. Thank you, Hashem. Yes, thank you, Hashem. But let's not forget the words of the Orach Chaim. God doesn't do those miracles, le'oseh avel, to those that are not doing the right thing. And especially, as God said, for people who are oseh avel in this thing, in this area, in this home. May Hashem bless us that the walls of our home will bear witness about us, and that they will be able to say wonderful things. I always wondered what it would look like if instead of random people speaking at a funeral, we could invite to speak the walls of the person's home. how different funerals would be. How much popcorn would people bring to funerals if the people that spoke at the funerals were the walls of a person's house? Be very spicy. We might enjoy funerals a little too much if that happened. My friends, what does your house say about you? May Hashem bless us, Be'ezat Hashem, that we should be zocheh to be able to, number one, have houses. Number two, make those houses into homes, into warm places. Number three, make those houses not just warm, not just nice and welcoming and fancy and plush and whatever, but also holy, because in truth, that is our Mishkan Hayadut. Shabbat Shalom.